Brace yourself for a gripping look at the most intense, heart-stopping moments in police history. These are the stories of bravery, danger, and sacrifice you won't believe until you see them. Watch as we uncover the most shocking officer deaths ever recorded. This is 2 hours of most shocking police officer deaths of all time. In Elgeyo Marakwet County, Kenya. Corporal Mushot Boma was stationed at the Embobut police post. He had been working tirelessly with his colleagues to protect young girls from the illegal and brutal practice of female genital mutilation, or FGM. The day had been long, but their mission was clear: rescue the girls who had been subjected to this inhumane procedure and ensure their safety. The struggle against FGM in Kenya has been an uphill battle. Despite being outlawed, the practice continues, especially in remote regions where cultural traditions hold strong. Women, often with limited medical knowledge, perform these procedures using crude methods and tools, causing severe physical and psychological harm to the girls. For Boma and his team, rescuing these girls was not just a duty, it was a moral cause. That afternoon, Boma and his colleagues had managed to rescue 6 girls who had been recently mutilated. They were taken to the I-10 County Referral Hospital for immediate medical attention. The police team had hoped that their intervention would signal a firm stance against this illegal practice. Little did they know their actions had stirred a dangerous hornet's nest. As the evening approached, an angry mob of young men from the nearby Marin VTC Center began to gather. These youths were determined to protect what they believed was their cultural right. They were incensed by the police intervention and felt their traditions were under attack. Armed with stones and sticks, they made their way towards the Embobut police post, where the rescued girls were temporarily sheltered. Boma was alone at the post, unaware of the impending danger. The mob arrived swiftly and forcefully. They stormed the police post, their numbers overwhelming Boma. He fought with all his efforts, but the odds were against him. The assailants stoned him mercilessly, and in a final act of brutality, they set his body on fire using a mattress from the station. The mob then fled, taking Boma's G3 rifle with 40 rounds of ammunition with them. The news of Boma's death spread quickly. County Police Commander Peter Mulinge confirmed the tragic incident, expressing deep sorrow over the loss of a dedicated officer. Boma's body was taken to a local mortuary for an autopsy. The attack sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. Activists, local leaders, and international organizations condemned the heinous act, viewing it as a severe setback in the fight against FGM. Tony Mwibia, founder and executive director of the Men End FGM Foundation, was particularly vocal. "It is shocking and disheartening that in the 21st century, we can kill a police officer rescuing girls undergoing the inhumane act," he said. Mwebia's organization focuses on rallying men and boys against FGM and child marriages. He questioned whether the attackers understood the harm caused by FGM, which they defended so violently. The attack on Boma highlighted the extreme measures some communities are willing to take to preserve their traditions. A local administrator who requested anonymity for fear of reprisals expressed concern that such attacks would embolden those performing FGM. "Killing a police officer in the name of FGM worries me," he said. He emphasized the need for comprehensive public sensitization to accompany legal enforcement. In response to the attack, additional police officers were deployed to Elgeyo Marakwet to conduct a major operation aimed at curbing the rising cases of FGM. The objective was twofold: track down and arrest those responsible for Boma's murder and address the widespread practice of FGM in the area. The operation faced significant challenges, as the perpetrators were often protected by local bandits willing to confront law enforcement. The operation was not just about punitive measures, it was also about sending a clear message that the government would not tolerate the continued practice of FGM. Commander Mulinge declared, "We cannot allow this to continue because this is outlawed. We are carrying out an operation to flush out the circumcisers and the bandits." Despite the tragic loss of Corporal Boma, the fight against FGM in Kenya continues. The incident has underscored the dangers faced by those working to eradicate this harmful practice, as well as the need for comprehensive strategies that include legal enforcement, community education, and cultural engagement. July 22, 2013, when the Las Vegas Metro Police Department received a distress call from a hiker stranded on a ledge just above Mary Jane Falls at Mount Charleston. The area was off limits and marked with signs warning hikers to stay out, but this man had ignored the warnings and was now disoriented and unable to move. A wildfire had been burning in the area for weeks, causing park workers to close several trails for public safety. The conditions were dangerous, with smoke and the risk of falling trees making the situation even more perilous. Despite these hazards, the Metro Search and Rescue Team, known for their bravery and expertise, geared up for the mission. Officer David Van Buskirk, a 36-year-old veteran of the force, was part of the rescue team that night. Van Buskirk had been with the department since 1999 and had joined the search and rescue team in 2007. He was known for his skill and dedication, having performed dozens of rescues in similar conditions. He lived in Henderson, Nevada with his wife and was deeply embedded in the Las Vegas community, both professionally and personally. The team located the stranded hiker just over an hour after the call came in. The decision was made to use the helicopter's internal rescue hoist to lift both Van Buskirk and the hiker to safety. As the helicopter hovered above, Van Buskirk was lowered to the ledge where the hiker was waiting. He attached a safety harness to the man and signaled to the helicopter crew to begin the hoist. Suddenly, in a moment that no one could have predicted, Van Buskirk became detached from the hoist line and fell a non-survivable distance into the canyon below. The hiker remained on the cable and was safely lifted into the helicopter. The mood among the officers was somber. The Las Vegas Metro Police Department had not lost an officer in the line of duty since 2009. They wore black bands over their badges in honor of Van Buskirk, mourning the loss of a beloved colleague and friend. Assistant Sheriff Joseph Lombardo expressed the collective grief and determination of the department. "We're a big family, a close family, and this is going to be trying on us for quite a while. We will survive it. We'll come back together, and hopefully in my lifetime, it will never happen again." Clark County Sheriff Doug Gillespie praised Van Buskirk's dedication to his duty, emphasizing the danger that first responders face every day. The rescue community and the wider public reacted with an outpouring of grief and respect. On social media, tributes poured in for Van Buskirk, with many calling him a hero. Nevada Governor Brian Sandoval and U.S. Senator Dean Heller were among those who publicly acknowledged his bravery and sacrifice. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration and the National Transportation Safety Board launched investigations to determine what went wrong. Initial reports showed no abnormalities in the harness, and the exact cause of Van Buskirk's fall remained unclear. The Las Vegas Metro Police Department's air unit came under scrutiny. Some speculated that outdated equipment, specifically the non-locking rescue hook, might have contributed to the accident. Ken Phillips, chief of the National Park Service's Search and Rescue Branch, noted that many progressive rescue units had upgraded to locking hooks to prevent such incidents. The Metro unit had not been aware of the forced rollout phenomenon, a scenario where a slack cable allows the carabiner on a rescuer's harness to roll over the top of the hook, pushing open the spring-loaded gate and causing the carabiner to separate from the hook. This type of equipment failure was common knowledge among many in the rescue industry, but not at Metro. In the aftermath of Van Buskirk's death, Metro replaced all its non-locking hooks with locking hooks, an upgrade that cost around $1,400 each. They also took steps to improve training and equipment standards to prevent future tragedies. It was about 1:35 p.m. on June 4, 2021, when Worcester police officer Emmanuel Manny Familia responded to a distress call at Green Hill Park. The call reported a person struggling in the pond. Manny, 38 years old and a 5-year veteran of the Worcester Police Department, arrived at the scene with 4 other officers. The day was clear and the pond seemed calm. Manny was born in La Vega, Dominican Republic, and moved to Worcester as a young boy. He grew up in the city, attending Doherty Memorial High School and later Quinsigamond Community College. His journey eventually led him to pursue a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Anna Maria College. Manny joined the Worcester Police Department in 2016 after serving as an officer at Clark University, Quinsigamond Community College, and in the small town of Oakham. At Green Hill Park, the situation was dire. Troy Love, a 14-year-old boy from Virginia, was visiting Worcester with his family. Troy was enjoying a summer day at the park when he decided to swim in the pond. Suddenly, he found himself struggling in the water. Panic set in as he waved his arm, desperately signaling for help. Manny and his fellow officers did not hesitate. They rushed into the pond, their training kicking in as they swam towards the struggling boy. In the chaos, they managed to pull 2 individuals out of the water. but Troy was still out there, and so was Manny. As the officers regrouped on the shore, they realized Manny was missing. The atmosphere grew tense as the search for their colleague began. Divers arrived and combed the murky depths of the pond. At 2:28 p.m., they found Manny. An hour later, they located Troy. Both were rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Manny and Troy were pronounced dead. The news of Manny's death shocked the Worcester community. Worcester Police Chief Stephen Sargent called Manny a hero, praising his selfless devotion to the city and his ultimate sacrifice. "The city of Worcester has lost a hero," Sargent said during a press conference. "We will remember and honor his selfless devotion to Worcester and his ultimate sacrifice to save someone he didn't know." Manny's death left a profound impact on his family, friends, and colleagues. He was known for his dedication and passion for his job. He was a member of the department's Tactical Patrol Force, the Crisis Intervention Team, and was training to join the SWAT team. Manny was also active in the community, playing on the department's basketball team and representing them at charitable events. His older brother, Elvin Familia, delivered a heartfelt eulogy at the funeral, describing Manny as the life of the family. Elvin shared memories that brought laughter and tears to those gathered at St. John's Catholic Church. He spoke about Manny's ability to grow a full beard, something Elvin joked he was still working on. But amidst the humor, there was a deep sense of loss and pride. "God called your dad up for a special detail up in heaven that only he can fill," Elvin said to Manny's children, 17-year-old Jayla and 13-year-old Jovan. "Manny left us with an incredible responsibility to look over you, and that's exactly what we'll do." The community rallied around the Familia family. Worcester's new minor league baseball stadium displayed a video feed of the dual-language Mass for those who couldn't fit inside the church. Outside, hundreds of officers lined the streets as Manny's body was brought to the church in a horse-drawn carriage. The burial followed the Mass, marking the end of a solemn day of mourning and remembrance. Manny's younger brother, Eric Familia, described him as a big brother like no other. The bond between the siblings was evident, and the loss felt by the Familia family was profound. Eric's words echoed the sentiments of many who knew Manny, a man who loved deeply and served his community with dedication. The Worcester community did not forget Troy Love and his family either. The loss of the young boy from Virginia was equally tragic. Troy, who dreamed of joining the military someday, was remembered by his family as a teenager who loved video games and had a bright future ahead of him. The Love family was in Worcester on vacation, a time that was supposed to be filled with joy and relaxation. Instead, it ended in heartbreak. To honor both Manny and Troy, 2 trees were planted at the edge of the pond in Green Hill Park. A memorial bench dedicated to Manny was also unveiled during a private ceremony. February 2, 2023, started as a regular shift for Officer Julian Becerra of the Fountain Police Department, but it was about to turn into a deadly nightmare. Julian, a 35-year-old U.S. Air Force veteran and experienced K-9 officer, was called to assist the Department of Corrections in tracking 3 carjacking suspects. The suspects, Devin Bobian, Anthony Vallejos, and Danisha Pacheco, were already known to be dangerous. Bobian, the most destructive of the trio, was a 4-time convicted felon and an escapee on the run. Around 5:30 p.m., officers spotted the stolen Hyundai near North Academy Boulevard and Platt Avenue. The chase began, a dizzying pursuit through the streets of Pueblo, Colorado. The suspects drove recklessly, speeding the wrong way down lanes, endangering everyone around them. It was clear that Bobian and his crew would stop at nothing to escape. The suspects stopped at a Love's Travel Center in Fountain. Abandoning the Hyundai, they set their sight on a silver Toyota 4Runner. Bobian approached the owner, a woman just about to pump gas. He took out his gun, threatening the woman and demanding her car keys. But the woman was extremely brave in the face of such danger. She called his bluff and refused to comply. Even more, she began walking away before confronting the carjackers, telling them to get out of her vehicle. By then, police were closing in. There was no time for the suspects to steal the woman's car. They rushed back to their stolen Hyundai, tearing away from the scene. The pursuit continued. It was like something out of an action movie, but the stakes were very real. People's lives were at risk. By 8 p.m., the Fountain Police Department executed a tactical vehicle intervention, pinning the Hyundai between 2 police cars on a bridge near South Academy Boulevard and South Hartford Street in Colorado Springs. 35-year-old Officer Julian Becerra was ready to do his duty and end the dangerous chase. He stepped out of his car, prepared to do what had to be done and arrest the suspects. But the situation escalated when Devin Beaubien, desperate and dangerous, exited the Hyundai. Instead of making a run for it, Beaubien climbed onto the roof of the stolen car and leaped onto Julian's vehicle. Julian found himself trapped between his vehicle and the bridge guardrail. It was a difficult position, and Beaubien made everything much worse for the officer. Instead of fleeing, the man turned his attention to Julian. He stood over the officer, staring at him menacingly, and then leaned forward in a threatening, deranged gesture. Julian was taken by surprise. Instantly, he lost his balance and tumbled over the guardrail, plummeting 40 feet from the bridge. Devin Beaubien decided it was time to flee the scene. He attempted to run, but with one of their own injured, the police were determined not to let him escape. Despite his struggles and attempts to crawl towards the edge of the bridge to jump, the officers managed to detain him. Beaubien was eventually stopped and taken into custody. Julian Becerra died on February 11, 2023. Devin Beaubien was found guilty of Julian Becerra's death and faced charges including second-degree murder, vehicular eluding, motor vehicle theft, weapon possession by a previous offender, and 2 counts of aggravated robbery. Evening of Monday, December 17, 2018, Officer Conrad Gary and Officer Eduardo Marmolejo responded to a shots-fired call. The call was triggered by a ShotSpotter sensor, a technology used by the city of Chicago, Illinois, to detect gunfire. That evening, gunfire was detected on Chicago's far south side. The 2 officers rushed to the scene, not knowing they were rushing to meet a cruel fate. At 31 years old, Conrad Gary was the kind of officer everyone could depend on. Despite being a rookie with just 18 months on the force, Conrad had an innate ability to navigate both crisis and chaos. He was a born protector. At 36 years old, Eduardo Marmolejo was also relatively new to the Chicago Police Department, with 2.5 years of experience. Eduardo had dedicated his life to public service. Before joining CPD, he worked tirelessly in a hospital. Both men exemplified commitment and bravery in their service to the community. Both officers were level-headed and quick to answer the call on that fateful evening. They arrived at the scene shortly before 6 p.m. and parked their patrol car near the train tracks at 103rd Street and Cottage Grove Avenue. According to body cam footage, Conrad and Eduardo exited their patrol car and started walking towards the train tracks. They were completely focused on their task. They discussed the possible direction in which the suspect might have fled, which way made the most sense, or why. Their body camera footage recorded their movements and words as they closed in. It was already dark outside. Chasing an individual with a gun is always one of the most, if not the most, dangerous things any police officer can do. The 2 officers were indeed in danger, but not because of the armed man. As they talked and tried to decide on a course of action, the situation escalated, adding another level of chaos. A loud northbound train arrived and passed. Conrad and Eduardo continued their pursuit along the tracks. But as they did so, they were completely unaware of their impending doom. The noise from the northbound train drowned out the sound of the southbound train approaching rapidly. Conrad and Eduardo were on the tracks. The body camera went black in an instant. The train screeched and came to a halt. But it was too late. Officer Conrad Gary and Officer Eduardo Marmolejo were both dead, killed by the train. The power went off on the train. Visibly shaken, the conductor told riders there was an emergency. Train workers searched the tracks with flashlights. Early Tuesday morning, 2 ambulances carried the bodies from the scene. With full police honors, the 15-mile procession passed by the 5th Police District, where the officers were stationed, before proceeding to the medical examiner's office, where officers saluted in a show of respect. According to an investigation, the train that hit and killed the 2 officers was traveling at a speed of about 65 miles per hour. There was no indication that the officers saw the southbound train coming, most likely because of the auditory shield created by the northbound train. Both Conrad Gary and Eduardo Marmolejo were devoted young fathers. Conrad was a loving husband and the father of an infant, while Eduardo was a dedicated husband and father of 3 children. Amid the overwhelming sorrow of their tragic loss, there was a small measure of closure when the suspect was eventually apprehended and a weapon was recovered. Their sacrifice remains a poignant reminder of the dangers those who serve and protect face. In February 2017, Eric Mumaw, an 18-year veteran of the Nashville Metro Police Department, responded to an urgent dispatch from the Metro Emergency Communications Center. The call concerned Julie Glisson, a distressed woman in crisis, located at the Peeler Park boat ramp near the Cumberland River. This scenario set the stage for a tense and potentially life-threatening situation, showcasing the bravery and dedication required of officers in the face of such emergencies. As expected, Eric and his colleague, Officer Nick Diamond, rushed to the location to save Julie before she could commit the act of taking her own life. Upon their arrival, they found her in the driver's seat of a car positioned precariously at the edge of the boat ramp with her foot on the brake. They immediately attempted to persuade her to leave the car and come with them. After a few minutes of back and forth, the driver's door opened, and they believed they had convinced Julie not to continue with her plan to end her life. However, at that moment, the car slipped out of the park and rolled into the water, as Julie shockingly decided to put the car into gear. The suddenness of the act caught Eric and Nick off guard, preventing them from reacting quickly enough. They both lost their footing and were pulled into the water by the car's weight as it sank. While Nick and Julie managed to swim back to shore quickly, Eric was carried further into the river, struggling against the cold water and challenging conditions. A third officer, Trent Craig, who witnessed the incident unfold, quickly ran along the riverbank for a short distance and jumped into the water to save Eric. However, he soon realized that the water was at neck level and frigid, with a strong current making it impossible to swim toward Eric. Faced with the danger to his own life, he was forced to make the difficult decision to get out of the water while Eric continued to drift further away. Minutes after Eric was no longer in sight, the Nashville Fire Department officers arrived and dispatched boats to search the river for him. Helicopters were also deployed to assist in the search efforts. Several hours later, a diver located Eric's body approximately 70 yards from the boat dock, confirming that he had drowned. Meanwhile, Officer Nick and Julie were rushed to a nearby medical center for treatment during the search for Eric. Both did not sustain any life-threatening injury during the incident. Within days, Nick was released, but Julie was booked in the county jail and placed under investigation. Ultimately, Julie was charged with aggravated vehicular homicide by intoxication alongside other charges. She pleaded guilty to the aggravated vehicular homicide charge and was subsequently handed a maximum penalty of 12 years in prison. Other charges were dropped while she was stripped of her driving license for 10 years. While Eric was alive, he was known for performing several heroic acts, including saving a baby inside a car that was hijacked from its father and rescuing an individual who was being attacked by a roommate wielding a sword. Over time, his actions earned him the department's Exemplary Service and Life-Saving Awards. Despite not being obligated to be on the night shift since he was a more senior officer, Eric would regularly volunteer for the change to help his colleagues. Meanwhile, in his community, he often went out of his way to help the people he served in his community. This was seen by his frequent bringing of donuts to local emergency service workers and hot meals for homeless people. Eric's untimely death was met with profound sorrow, leaving a community in mourning. Known for his dedication and kindness, Eric was honored with heartfelt tributes from colleagues and friends alike. A memorial service drew law enforcement officers and first responders from across the state, all gathered to pay their respects. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Valor, the Metro Nashville Police Department's highest honor. 3 years later, his legacy was permanently etched into the heart of his community with the unveiling of a commemorative plaque at Peeler Park, a lasting tribute to his service and sacrifice. On August 25, 2017, Hurricane Harvey, a ferocious Category 4 hurricane, unleashed its wrath on Houston and nearby cities, causing catastrophic flooding and torrential rainfall. The sheer devastation left communities in chaos, with entire neighborhoods submerged underwater. Amid this turmoil, just 2 days after the disaster struck, Steve Perez, a dedicated sergeant with the Houston Police Department, demonstrated extraordinary bravery. Despite the dangerous conditions and overwhelming destruction, he made the courageous decision to report for duty, exemplifying unwavering commitment and heroism in the face of unprecedented adversity. His actions provided a beacon of hope and resilience to a city in desperate need. At around 4 a.m. that day, Steve left his house for work despite the warnings from his wife and father-in-law, who believed it was too dangerous for him to commute in such conditions. After driving for over 2 hours to reach his duty station, Steve soon realized that the conditions were far worse than anticipated. The hurricane's force destroyed every possible route to his station, or was rendered impassable by the overwhelming floodwaters. Being the dedicated professional he was, Steve refused to turn back home. Instead, he followed departmental protocol and decided to go to a secondary location. He informed dispatch of his intentions and advised that he would report to the nearest station in Kingwood. However, tragically, he never made it to that location. Throughout that day, Steve's absence went unnoticed amidst the chaos of the flooding crisis. On August 28th, his absence was finally noted during a roll call conducted by a senior officer. Immediately, Steve's colleagues began attempting to reach him, knowing he was not one to miss work without a reason. When they contacted his wife, she shared that she had not seen him since he left home. Meanwhile, attempts to contact his phone and the dispatch in his assigned police vehicle were unsuccessful. At this point, it was clear that Steve was missing. His colleagues swung into action, initiating an extensive search along the potential paths he might have taken to reach the station in Kingwood. After several hours, they narrowed the search to an area around Hardy Tollway and Beltway 8. However, the area was still heavily submerged, and with nightfall approaching, it was too dangerous to begin an underwater search for Steve. The next day, members of the Houston Police Department dive team resumed the search for Steve. Ultimately, they located his body in patrol car. It was determined that as he drove into an underpass about 16.5 feet, his patrol car was swept away by the high water in the area. The cause of death was also concluded to be drowning. Steve's untimely death came 2 days shy of his 61st birthday. During his 34 years of service as a police officer, he worked in various offices for the department, including the Juvenile, Emergency Communications, Special Operations, Crime Analysis and Command Center, Vehicular Crimes, and Traffic Enforcement Divisions. His colleagues described him as a gentle public servant and one of the sweetest people in the department. His son Maverick also fondly remembered him as the most excellent protector, defender, and rescuer, whose love was pure and endless and made him believe he could do anything. A few weeks after Steve's death, he was buried at the Houston National Cemetery. His memorial service featured honor guards, a riderless horse, a helicopter flyover, and a last radio call held in his honor, celebrating his dedication and sacrifice. To help the family Steve had left behind, the Sergeants Benevolent Association launched a GoFundMe. It received an outpouring of generosity from well-wishers, raising nearly $20,000 from over 300 donations within a few weeks. 2024, Deputy Fred Fislar of the Hendricks County Police received a call about a single vehicle crash within his vicinity. The incident involved a 2009 silver Honda colliding with a utility pole, shattering it on impact and leaving electrical wires hanging close to the ground. Knowing that the downed wires posed a significant danger to any passers-by and the yet-to-be-identified occupant of the vehicle, Fred rushed to the scene to assess the situation and coordinate the emergency response required. Upon his arrival, Deputy Fred Fislar noticed that the driver had suffered severe burns and immediately initiated efforts to rescue him. However, he unfortunately came into contact with the hanging electrical lines that were still flowing with current during the process. Instantly, he was severely shocked by the current and lost consciousness. Minutes later, a passerby saw the incident and noticed Fred lying unresponsive on the road. The individual quickly used Fred's radio to contact the Hendricks County Communications Center to inform them about the situation. When the emergency medical service officers arrived, they found Fred in a critical condition. They initiated life-saving measures on the scene and continued to provide emergency care as he was transported to the nearest hospital. Despite their best efforts, Fred was ultimately pronounced dead hours later, succumbing to the severe injuries sustained from the electrical shock. Ironically, the driver of the 2009 silver Honda that had crashed into the utility pole, Juan Gomez, survived the incident. Although he had sustained severe burn injuries, they were not life-threatening, and he was subsequently released from the hospital pending the completion of an investigation into the incident. However, in a shocking turn of events, Juan was arrested before the conclusion of the inquiry for a separate operating while intoxicated OWI incident that had occurred before the crash. He faced multiple charges in that case: operating a vehicle while intoxicated, endangering a person, minor consuming alcohol, knowingly or intentionally operating a motor vehicle without ever receiving a license. and operating a car with an alcohol concentration equivalent to 0.15 or more. Before Fred's death, he had served in the Hendricks County Police Department for only 3 years after leaving the United States Marine Corps. A memorial service was held in his honor at Cloverdale High School, where he was an alumnus. Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter attended the service and described Fred as the epitome of a United States Marine, a proud father, husband, and son, and a peer and mentor to many people. A close friend also fondly remembered Fred, saying, "He was always smiling. He was the life of the party and never had a bad word to say about anyone." Fred is survived by his wife and 2 young children, who now face an unimaginable loss. In solidarity, the Hendricks County Sheriff's Office established an official fund for donations to support his grieving family. Additionally, a Red Cross blood drive was organized in his honor, reflecting his spirit of giving. Efforts are also underway to commemorate Fred's dedicated service, with plans to rename the section of road where the tragic incident occurred after him, ensuring his legacy endures in the community he served so faithfully. March 2, 1977, in Richmond, North Yorkshire, Detective Constable Norman Garnham, a 25-year-old dedicated police officer, was driving home from work. DC Garnham was recently promoted and was known for his commitment and bravery. Little did he know that evening would change everything. Norman Garnham had joined the North Yorkshire Police Force in 1975, and after just 2 years, he was promoted to the rank of Detective Constable. His peers and superiors highly regarded him for his dedication to duty and willingness to help others. On that day, as he was making his way home, he noticed a young man hitchhiking by the side of the road. Always ready to lend a hand, Garnham decided to stop and offer him a ride. The young man was Colin Simpson, an 18-year-old who had just fled his home after a violent confrontation with his sisters. Troubled and desperate, Simpson was looking for a way out of Richmond. When Garnham stopped to help, Simpson didn't initially realize he was a police officer. But as the journey continued, he recognized the badge and uniform. Norman Garnham, unaware of Simpson's recent violent outburst, continued driving. However, Simpson's demeanor changes once he realizes Garnham is a police officer. In a sudden and brutal attack, Simpson stabbed Garnham twice in the chest, aiming for his heart. The attack was swift and deadly. After the attack, Simpson fled the scene. An hour later, he was found trying to hitch another ride on the A1 near Scotch Corner. The police quickly apprehended him, and he was charged with the murder of Detective Constable Norman Garnham. Simpson was later convicted and sentenced to life in prison for his crime. The murder of Norman Garnham was a shock to the community and the police force. He was the first North Yorkshire police officer to be killed in the line of duty. Norman Garnham's death did not go unnoticed. His colleagues and the community wanted to ensure that his sacrifice was remembered. Sergeant Amy Hunter, who later discovered she shared the same collar number as Garnham, played a key role in establishing a memorial in his honor. She felt a deep connection to Garnham and wanted to ensure his bravery and service were never forgotten. In 2018, a memorial plaque was unveiled in Garnham's honor. The plaque is placed on the courtyard wall of the Green Howards Museum in Richmond. The museum, housed in a deconsecrated 14th century church, provides a fitting location for the memorial. The plaque reminds us of Garnham's ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty. During the unveiling ceremony, Assistant Chief Constable Phil Kane of North Yorkshire Police spoke about Garnham's dedication and the tragic end he met due to an act of kindness. He emphasized that Norman was murdered following an initial act of kindness that unfortunately led to his untimely death. Kane stressed the importance of remembering Garnham's sacrifice and acknowledged that such tragic events can happen anywhere and, regrettably, still occur. Inspector Denise Wan from North Yorkshire Police also honored Garnham's memory by participating in the Police Unity Tour cycling event. This 180-mile ride aimed to raise awareness and funds for care of police survivors, a UK charity dedicated to supporting the families of police officers who have died in the line of duty. Inspector Wand expressed her privilege in riding in Garnham's memory and the importance of supporting bereaved families through such tragedies. The Police Unity Tour was about raising funds and keeping fallen officers' memories alive. Participants from various police forces joined the event, cycling from York to the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. This 2-day journey culminated in a memorial service with families of fallen officers. The memorial to Norman Garnham has been well received by the community and his family. Councillor Stuart Parsons emphasized the monument's importance, noting that it was long overdue as Garnham had no memorial for years. Parsons highlighted that it seemed as if Garnham had faded from people's memories, and the memorial serves as a reminder that tragedy can strike even in a beautiful, tranquil place like Richmond. In 2021, North Yorkshire Police announced plans for a stone memorial to be made in Richmond Market Square. This would provide a more prominent location for people to remember and reflect on Garnham's sacrifice. The Police Memorial Trust agreed to fund the plaque, ensuring that Garnham's story would continue to March 5, 2015 in North Philadelphia. Officer Robert Wilson III, a devoted police officer and father, visited a GameStop on West Lehigh Avenue to purchase a video game for his son's birthday. Despite being on duty and in full uniform, he took a moment to step inside the store out of parental love and devotion. Meanwhile, his partner, Officer Damian Stevenson, waited outside in a marked police car. This seemingly straightforward act of fatherly love would soon unfold into a scene of tragedy and heroism. Inside the store, Officer Wilson stood at the register with 4 customers and 3 store employees. The atmosphere was calm until 2 men, Carlton Hipps and Ramon Williams, walked past the police car outside and entered the store. Without warning, they drew handguns and announced a robbery. The tranquility shattered as they opened fire. In that moment of chaos, Officer Wilson made a split-second decision. Instead of seeking cover, he moved away from the counter, drawing the robbers' attention to himself. His courageous act aimed to protect the innocent lives around him. Bullets flew as he engaged in a fierce gun battle with the 2 armed men. Despite being struck multiple times, he continued to fight, determined to protect those in the store. Outside, Officer Stevenson heard the gunfire and quickly exited his vehicle. He saw the suspects attempting to flee and fired at them, hitting one in the leg. The second suspect ran back inside, discarding his weapon and trying to blend in with the crowd. By then, additional officers arrived and both men were taken into custody. Officer Wilson was rushed to Temple University Hospital, but despite the medical team's best efforts, he succumbed to his injuries. He left behind 2 young sons and a grieving family. The city of Philadelphia mourned the loss of a hero who had given his life to protect others. In the aftermath, Wilson's bravery received widespread recognition. President Barack Obama posthumously awarded him the Medal of Valor, the highest honor in law enforcement. His heroism was further commemorated with a mural on Baltimore Avenue, painted by artist David McShane. Additionally, the Philadelphia Police Department renamed its most prestigious award to the Sir G. Robert Wilson III Medal of Valor in his honor. The community and Wilson's family held memorials to honor his memory. They gathered at the mural on South 60th Street and Baltimore Avenue yearly to release balloons in his memory. His sister, Shakira Wilson Burroughs, and his partner, Officer Stevenson, spoke of the profound impact his death had on their lives. Stevenson, who kept Wilson's badge on his police vehicle door, described the relentless trauma he endured, haunted by the sound of gunfire. Despite the reverence for Wilson's sacrifice, controversy erupted when District Attorney Larry Krasner offered a plea deal to the suspects, Hipps and Williams. They pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty, resulting in life sentences without parole. This decision was met with outrage from Wilson's family and the Philadelphia Fraternal Order of Police, or FOP, who felt the plea deal was a betrayal. John McNesby, the FOP president, called the decision despicable, and Wilson Burroughs described it as a smack in the face to her family. Krasner defended his decision, citing the lack of executions in Pennsylvania and the desire to spare Wilson's family from the prolonged trauma of future trials. He emphasized that the case had been politicized and that the mothers of Wilson's sons had faced intimidation and harassment. The plea deal sparked a broader debate on the death penalty and its application. Former Mayor Michael Nutter criticized the decision, and Police Commissioner Richard Ross described the hearing as painful for Wilson's family. The Coalition for a Just District Attorney supported Krasner, arguing against state-enacted violence and advocating for investments in addressing the root causes of violence. Robert Wilson III's story is proof of his bravery and dedication. He redefined what it means to be a hero, putting the safety of others above his own life. His actions on that day in March 2015 continue to inspire and remind people of the sacrifices made by those who serve and protect. November 12, 2022, what began as a routine missing person report in New South Wales escalated into a harrowing tragedy in Queensland, Australia. The event, now infamously known as the Wiambilla shooting, claimed the lives of 2 dedicated police officers, Constable Matthew Arnold and Constable Rachel McCrow, along with a courageous civilian, Alan Dare. This tragic incident has left a lasting impact on the community and underscored the inherent dangers faced by those who serve to protect. The chain of events began with the disappearance of Nathaniel Train, a former principal at 2 schools in New South Wales. He was last heard from on October 9th, raising concerns for his well-being from his family members. The situation then became even more complex when Nathaniel's estranged wife, who reported him missing, revealed that she had been receiving threats from his brother, Gareth Train. Gareth resided in Queensland, which meant the New South Wales police officers had no jurisdiction there. Consequently, they contacted their Queensland counterparts to conduct a welfare check on him and his wife Stacey regarding Nathaniel's whereabouts. They also instructed them to follow up on a warrant related to a December 2021 incident involving illegal weapon disposal and a potential border violation. However, the seemingly routine welfare check escalated into a deadly confrontation when Constable Matthew and Constable Rachel arrived with two other constables at the location. Upon arrival, they discovered the entrance to the property was locked and no one was in sight. They jumped the fence and approached the main residence to see if anyone was home. Seconds after they reached the residence, they were ambushed by a hail of bullets fired by the occupants within. During the surprise attack, Matthew and Rachel were hit multiple times. One of the other officers, also wounded, escaped to raise the alarm, while the last officer quickly hid in the nearby bush. After the barrage of shots, the assailants emerged from their hiding spots. They were no other than Gareth, Stacey, and Nathaniel, who had been missing. The evil trio approached Matthew and Rachel, where they lay injured, and then fired additional bullets into them in an execution style to ensure they were dead. They subsequently removed the Glock pistols on Matthew and Rachel and began searching for the officer hiding in the bush. Unable to locate the hidden officer, the assailants set the bush on fire to force him out. At this moment, Alan Dare, a neighbor of Gareth and Nathaniel, approached to investigate the fire. Tragically, his concern sealed his fate. Upon seeing him, the killers ruthlessly shot him, ending his life without hesitation. The officer who managed to escape returned with multiple specialist police officers, leading to a 6-hour siege at the residence. In the end, Nathaniel, Gareth, and Stacey were all killed, while the officer who had been hiding in the bush was rescued. Subsequent investigation into the incident established that the shooting was a religiously motivated terrorist attack targeting police. It was concluded that Nathaniel, Gareth, and Stacey acted as an autonomous cell subscribing to a broad Christian fundamentalist belief system known as premillennialism. In honor of the fallen officers, the police union decided to buy the rural property where they were killed to serve as a memorial site. Additionally, the incident prompted the proposal of a national firearms register to help keep Australia's first responders and community safer. Dennis Eric Guerra came from a family dedicated to law enforcement. His father was a retired New York City Police Department officer, and his mother was a retired school safety agent. Naturally, Dennis chose to follow in their footsteps. He began his career at the NYPD as a school safety agent, before becoming a Rikers Island North Infirmary correctional officer. 2006, Dennis returned to the New York Police Department to serve as an officer. Over the next 8 years, he made more than 70 arrests in the line of duty. However, on April 6, 2014, Dennis tragically lost his life due to an event sparked by the impulsive actions of a teenager. On the afternoon of that day, Dennis and his partner, Rose Rodriguez, were dispatched to a New York City Housing Authority building in the Coney Island section of Brooklyn after concerned individuals called the authorities about a possible fire outbreak. Upon arriving, they discovered the fire was on the 13th floor of the building. Rather than taking the stairs, the duo decided to use the elevator, thinking it would get them there faster. Unfortunately, this seemingly wise decision turned out to be a critical mistake. As Dennis and Rose stepped off the elevator onto the 13th floor, they were immediately overcome by heavy smoke and carbon monoxide fumes. Had they taken the stairs, they would have encountered the smoke gradually and recognized the danger before moving further. Despite Dennis and Rose calling for assistance, it was already too late from the moment they stepped off the elevator. The smoke and fumes disoriented them and made breathing increasingly difficult. When members of the New York City Fire Department arrived, they found Dennis and Rose unconscious and unresponsive. CPR was immediately performed on both detectives to renew them before their transfer to a local hospital. Both were in critical condition upon arrival, with Dennis in particular going into cardiac arrest 4 times. Unfortunately, 3 days later, he succumbed to the injuries he had sustained during the fire, even though he was transferred to a more specialized hospital for treatment. Meanwhile, Rose ultimately survived, but sustained lifelong respiratory injuries. Following the incident, investigations uncovered that 16-year-old Marcel Dockery was responsible for igniting the fire. He confessed to setting a mattress ablaze in the hallway out of boredom while awaiting his cousins to open their apartment door on the 13th floor. Those same investigations revealed that Marcel had a troubling history of fires. At age 13, he was involved in an incident where he created a makeshift blowtorch using a lighter and a can of hairspray in the school cafeteria. Photos from the scene of his bedroom showed scorched walls and piles of used matches. Initially, federal prosecutors charged Marcel with first-degree assault for setting the fire. After Dennis died, a second-degree murder charge was added to his case. Despite being offered a plea deal of 22 years in jail, Marcel chose to go to trial. Ultimately, the trial concluded with a verdict of 19 years to life, with an additional 2 years added for an unrelated robbery charge. The sentencing was received positively by those who had shown up every day for the 2-week trial. At Dennis's funeral, he was posthumously promoted to first-grade detective and awarded the Medal of Honor the following year. In tribute to his bravery, a street in New York City was renamed in his honor. Just after 11 p.m. on August 15, 2019, police constables Andrew Harper and Andrew Shaw finished their shifts when Thames Valley Police received a 999 call. Harper and Shaw were actually on their way home. They didn't have to respond, but they decided to do it anyway. The call came from a property in Berkshire, UK. A burglary was underway. A group was trying to steal a 10,000-pound quad bike. The two police constables started driving to the location, hoping to stop the thieves and return the quad bike to its rightful owner. At 28 years old, Andrew Harper was a respected police constable. He was kind and selfless, doing everything in his power to help. Harper was newly married to the love of his life, Lissy, and was looking forward to their honeymoon in the Maldives later that month. He had no idea that responding to this call would forever change his and Lissy's lives. At about 11:28 p.m. that night, police constables Andrew Harper and Andrew Shaw came across a Seat Toledo vehicle driving towards them on Admore Lane, a narrow street. They noticed straight away that the car was towing a quad bike. They also saw that one of the suspects was outside the vehicle, trying to unhitch the motorcycle, most likely because they wanted to ditch the Honda TRX 500 quad bike and quickly exit. It is possible that Harper and Shaw were surprised to see that the suspects were teenagers, but these weren't typical teenagers. They were thieves who had meticulously planned this burglary. Hours before, 19-year-old Henry Long and 18-year-olds Jesse Cole and Albert Bowers turned off their car's rear lights and taped over the number plate. They then drove to the quad bike's location, masked and armed with an axe and crowbars, ready to take out anyone in their way. But the quad bike owner saw the three teenagers taking it and roping its handlebars to the back of their vehicle. He was the one to make the call that police constables Andrew Harper and Andrew Shaw answered. Harper and Shaw now encountered the teenage suspects. They saw 18-year-old Cole unhitching the bike. Andrew Harper quickly got out of the police car and ran to the suspect's vehicle, trying to stop them from getting away. But Cole saw him and quickly dived through a passenger window. The rope they'd used to tow the quad bike was still attached to their car. In a cruel twist of fate, unwittingly, Andrew Harper stepped with both feet into the trailing tow strap, becoming essentially lassos to the suspect's vehicle. 19-year-old Henry Long, the trio's leader, was also the designated driver for this nefarious endeavor. He long sped off, driving at up to 60 miles per hour. Andrew Harper was trapped, swinging like a pendulum behind the speeding car. He was most likely rendered unconscious as soon as he hit the road, thus becoming unable to free himself from the rope. In the meantime, Andrew Shaw rushed to help Harper, but eventually lost sight of the suspect's car. But he did find Harper's stab vest in the road. After about a mile of being dragged behind the car at breakneck speed, Andrew Harper was disentangled from the moving vehicle. Some other colleagues found him on the road. His police uniform had been ripped and stripped from his body by the high-speed journey. Harper was dead, having suffered horrific injuries. His death came as a shock to his friends, family, and colleagues. But the shock only became more incredible when the three teenagers were eventually apprehended and brought to trial. Long, Cole, and Bowers were seen laughing and joking at the trial. Bowers even fell asleep as the prosecutor showed footage of Harper's demise. The prosecutor tried to show that the three suspects had intended to kill Andrew Harper by speeding off instead of stopping the vehicle. The jury, however, acquitted all three defendants of murder, but found them guilty of manslaughter. In the wake of Andrew's tragic demise, his wife, Lissy Harper, campaigned vigorously for Harper's Law. This law mandates life sentences for anyone convicted of the manslaughter of an on-duty emergency worker. Enacted in 2022, the law did not impact the sentences of Long, Cole, and Bowers. It was February 2nd, 2023. Julian Becerra, a Colorado officer with the Fountain Police Department, was on duty when he and multiple other officers were asked to assist the Department of Corrections in tracking down 3 carjacking suspects: 31-year-old Devin Bobian, 37-year-old Anthony Vallejos, and 28-year-old Denisha Pacheco. At 35 years old, Julian Becerra was a U.S. Air Force veteran who'd served with the Fountain Police Department for 4.5 years. Julian was assigned to the Patrol Division as a K-9 officer. He was experienced, having previously served with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, first as a security technician and then as a deputy sheriff. Not only was Julian a brave and dedicated police officer, but he was also a proud father of 2. He had a son and a daughter. On February 2nd, Julian responded to the call. What followed was a movie-like car chase. Around 5:30 p.m. that day, several officers spotted the stolen car, a Hyundai out of Pueblo, Colorado, near North Academy Boulevard and Platte Avenue. They identified the suspects, Bobian, Vallejos, and Pacheco, and pursued them. It was clear the 3 suspects were reckless. They were driving erratically, often driving the wrong way down lanes. It was a dangerous situation, and the suspects, especially Devin Bobian, were harmful. Bobian was a 4-time convicted felon and an escapee. 2 months before, Bobian escaped from a community corrections site in Pueblo. At some point during the chase, the suspects stopped at Love's Travel Center in Fountain. The 3 exited the stolen Hyundai and approached a silver Toyota 4Runner in the parking lot. They intended to steal the Toyota and have police lose their trail. One of the suspects approached the car's owner, a woman just about to pump gas. He had a gun. He pointed the muzzle at the woman, demanding her keys and asking her to empty her pockets. Meanwhile, the other 2 entered her vehicle, waiting for their partner to get the keys. But the woman refused to give over her keys. Instead, she started to walk away. She then turned around and told them to get out of her car. The police were getting closer. When they arrived at Love's Travel Center, the suspects ran back into the Hyundai they had entered and sped away. Just before 8 p.m., though, the Fountain Police Department utilized a tactical vehicle intervention technique to stop the suspects, pinning the vehicle between 2 police cars. One of the police cars belonged to Julian Becerra. They were on a bridge near South Academy Boulevard and South Hartford Street in Colorado Springs. Julian exited the car, ready to arrest the suspects, but stuck between his vehicle and the bridge guardrail. At the same time, Devin Bobian exited his car. He had to escape. He climbed on the roof of the stolen Hyundai and then leaped on the hood of Julian's car. With Julian Becerra stuck between the car and the guardrail, Bobian should have grabbed the chance and started running away from the police. Instead, the man stopped and turned his attention to Julian. He turned toward the officer standing over him and leaned forward threateningly. Bobian pointed toward Julian, a terrifying gesture that caused Julian Becerra to fall over the guardrail, plummeting 40 feet from the bridge. That's when Bobian attempted to flee by foot, but he was detained shortly after. He fought a lot, and while being handcuffed, Bobian managed to crawl toward the edge of the bridge. He was stopped before he could jump and taken into custody. Julian Becerra was airlifted to the hospital. He was put on life support on Friday, February 10th, but ultimately succumbed to his multiple injuries and died the next day, 9 days after the incident. Devin Bobian was found guilty in Julian Becerra's death and was charged with second-degree murder, vehicular eluding, motor vehicle theft, weapon possession by a previous offender, and 2 counts of aggravated robbery for his actions in the February 2nd car chase. At 5:57 p.m. on May 5, 2024, the Utah Highway Patrol received a worrying call from a concerned traffic participant. The caller claimed a person was standing on the back of a semi-trailer. Sergeant Bill Hooser, 50, was stationed at an I-15 median in Santaquin, Utah, when he noticed a white truck matching the description given by the caller. Bill Hooser was a police officer who truly loved his job. He started as a volunteer before joining the Santaquin City Police Department in 2017. Bill was also recently promoted from corporal to sergeant in February 2024. He loved serving the community he called home and helping people in need. Bill followed the truck off the freeway. The 911 call from the concerned driver had made it seem like someone needed assistance, but the truck driver ran a stop sign and even attempted to enter the freeway again. That's when Sergeant Bill Hooser managed to pull the car over, assisted by Utah Highway Patrol Trooper Dustin Griffiths. The two police officers approached the truck to speak with the driver and determine the issue. The driver, Michael Aaron Jane, was initially uncooperative and refused to answer their questions. The officers assured him they were there to help and that he wasn't in trouble. This reassurance eventually led Jane to hand over the truck's digital log to Dustin Griffiths. But as the trooper was checking the document, something strange happened. A woman jumped out of the passenger door. She was obviously in distress. She sprinted to the back of the trailer and around the other side. Her hands were up. What the officers didn't know was that Michael Aaron Jane had essentially kidnapped the woman hours earlier. Initially, she had been voluntarily riding with him, but an argument erupted when they stopped at a truck stop in Beaver, Utah. Jane decided to abandon her and drove off without her, only to return several times, pleading for her to come back. When she refused, Jane became enraged, threatening her with a knife and bear spray, coercing her to re-enter the vehicle. As soon as the woman jumped out of the truck, Sergeant Bill Hooser started walking back to the semi-truck, gesturing to Trooper Dustin Griffiths that they needed to get Jane out of the vehicle and detain him. But Michael Jane had entirely different plans. The trucker locked the door and drove off. Bill and Dustin started running to their cars, their backs now to the truck. Bill Hooser didn't see it coming until the very last minute. He didn't see Jane making a sharp U-turn, coming straight at him until the last moment. Bill tried in vain to move away from his car door jamb, out of the path of the speeding truck. But there was no time. The truck's grill and bumper smashed Bill's body into one of the patrol cars. Sergeant Bill Hooser was killed instantly, but Michael Jane didn't plan to stop. Instead, he gunned the truck toward Trooper Dustin Griffiths and the woman, and he would have hit them too were it not for the woman. She saw the car coming and warned Dustin. They both jumped and ran from the path of the oncoming vehicle. Jane fled the scene, then pulled over and ran off the freeway. He managed to evade police for a while, stealing multiple vehicles, but officers caught up near Vernal, where they performed a maneuver that stopped him. Jane went off the road and crashed. He sustained severe injuries and was transported to the hospital. Michael Jane faces charges of aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, and attempted kidnapping. It was September 19, 2004. Senior patrol agents Travis W. Attaway, Jeremy Wilson, and Javier Sandoval were conducting a routine patrol of the Rio Grande River, the way they had done many times before. But the river was different that day. It was unusually swollen and harder to navigate. Still, the three men were experienced. Like any other agent, they knew the job came with inherent risks. They didn't know, however, that this would be their last mission for two of them. At 31 years old, Travis Wayne Attaway was a serious agent. Besides his work on boats, he often participated in bike and horse patrols. As for Jeremy Wilson, he was 29 years old and a third-generation Border Patrol agent who was inspired to pursue this career by both his father and his grandfather. Both Travis and Jeremy were hard-charging, dedicated agents. They were also both in their 7th year on the job. They knew the river better than anyone, but water can be treacherous, especially in changing weather conditions. It had rained the previous day, raising the water level by a foot. Current speeds were measured at about 5,000 gallons a second. These were harsher conditions and had to be handled carefully, especially since the Rio Grande River was and still is one of the Border Patrol's most dangerous assignments. That Sunday, September 19th, 2 boats were sent downstream from Los Indos, Texas, because something had activated a sensor. Travis, Jeremy, and Javier were on one of the 2 boats, a lightweight 19-foot Predator model. They maneuvered the boat toward a weir on the extremely high river. The water seemed furious, almost alive. Once they approached the weir, Travis Attaway and Jeremy Wilson positioned themselves at the front of the boat. They each had poles, which they used to check for shallow areas or submerged objects. Around 2:40 p.m., the situation took a dramatic turn. The boat was caught in an eddy, causing Jeremy Wilson to lose his footing and fall into the water. Reacting quickly, Javier Sandoval cut off the motor, but the following events happened in a blur. Travis Attaway, determined to save Jeremy from drowning, removed his 21-pound duty belt and grabbed a rope, throwing it to Jeremy. Suddenly, the boat began to fill with water and capsized instantly. The 3 men fought to stay afloat as the crew from a second boat noticed their struggle and rushed to assist. However, the river's current was relentless, and the second boat nearly capsized as well. They managed, however, to rescue Sandoval, who had clung to debris to stay afloat before the other crew could reach him, and struggled to remove his boots and belt to dispose of unnecessary weight that could have hindered his attempts at staying afloat. But there was no sign of Travis Attaway or Jeremy Wilson. To make things worse, both men wore long pants. One had cowboy boots and the other had tactical boots laced up, making them difficult to remove. It seemed that all odds were against them. Several local, state, and federal agencies conducted an extensive 10-mile search for the men, even dragging parts of the riverbed. Mexican forces also contributed by searching the river's southern side. The search took 2 days. By the time the bodies were found, everybody knew this wasn't a rescue operation but a recovery mission. Travis Attaway's body was found on September 21, 2004, at around 1:30 a.m. Jeremy Wilson's body floated up at approximately 3 a.m. the same day. Both bodies were found near the accident site, with officials concluding that a dam submerged by unusually high waters had created a whirlpool effect that had been likely trapping the bodies. The currents carried the lightweight 19-foot Predator model boat over 4 miles downstream before it was recovered. By the time it was retrieved, the river had stripped everything except the motor and steering wheel. The 2 agents were deemed heroes by the U.S. Border Patrol. They were honored in August 2022 when the U.S. Border Patrol Rio Grande Valley sector named patrol vessels after them posthumously. On July 9, 2007, Officer Russell Timoshenko and his partner, Officer Herman Yan, patrolled Crown Heights, a neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, in their marked 71st Precinct police car. Russell Timoshenko, who was 23 years old, was in the passenger seat. At that point, he had been with the force for about 18 months. As such, he was still a rookie, but already a dedicated cop. It was around 2:30 a.m. when Russell and Herman noticed a 2003 black BMW SUV heading westbound on Lefferts Avenue. For unknown reasons, the 2 officers decided to run the license plate. Maybe they had a hunch, or it was only routine. However, the license plate returned as registered to an entirely different car, a 2007 Mitsubishi Outlander, not the black BMW in front of them. Suspecting foul play, Russell Timoshenko and Yan signaled the driver to pull over. The driver complied, turning north onto Rogers Avenue. Both officers exited their vehicle and approached the BMW, with Timoshenko approaching from the passenger side and Yan from the driver's side. Unbeknownst to them, there were 3 dangerous men inside the black BMW. All of them had violent criminal records and were determined to avoid returning to prison. Dexter Bostic, who was in the passenger seat, had served 9 years for assault, robbery, and sodomy in 1990, and 3 years for armed robbery in 2001. Robert Ellis, who sat in the back seat, had been convicted of first-degree sexual assault and sodomy at 19. Lee Woods, the driver, had served time for illegal weapons possession and assaulting a police officer. Only a day before, the 3 men had opened fire on an innocent man, shattering his femur, and then stole $1,800 in cash, a chain, and the keys to the man's vehicle. They were unpredictable and violent. As 23-year-old Officer Russell Timoshenko made his way to the BMW, Dexter Bostic waited for the right time. When Russell got close enough, Bostic opened fire with a .45 caliber handgun. 2 bullets struck Russell, one in the face and one in the throat. He collapsed to the ground. Simultaneously, from the back seat, Robert Ellis shot Herman Yan with a 9mm handgun, hitting him in the arm and chest. Herman's ballistic vest saved his life. He returned fire, but the 3 suspects fled the scene. They abandoned the BMW on Kingston Avenue, approximately 4 blocks from where the shooting occurred. Russell Timoshenko was rushed to Kings County Hospital Center, but his injuries were severe. The bullets had severely damaged his spinal cord, leaving him unable to breathe on his own or move his muscles. He went without oxygen for 15 to 20 minutes due to initial paralysis, which eventually led to a coma. Police apprehended one of the suspects, Leo Woods, on July 10, 2007. Woods identified Bostic and Ellis as his accomplices, claiming he was unaware they would open fire on the officers. In the meantime, Dexter Bostic and Robert Ellis did their best to escape. They hitchhiked across Long Island and took a ferry to Bridgeport, Connecticut. From there, they drove west to Pennsylvania. They planned to hide in a forest. The suspects were eventually spotted near Interstate 80 by a passing motorist who alerted the police. Authorities quickly arrived, causing the men to flee. A state trooper tackled Bostic, but Ellis managed to escape. He was apprehended the next morning. Both men were extradited to New York on July 12th. But nothing could be done for Officer Russell Timoshenko. Despite being placed on life support, tests on July 14th revealed no brain activity. He was pronounced dead at 4:14 p.m. when doctors turned off the respirator. Tens of thousands of people attended his funeral. Bostic and Woods received life sentences without parole for the murder, while Ellis was cleared of murder but convicted on weapon charges. It was the night of Thursday, January 27, 1972. NYPD officers Rocco Laurie and Gregory Foster were out, walking their usual beat on Avenue B and East 11th Street in the 9th Precinct of New York. They had just answered a call about a domestic dispute, but that case was over, and Rocco and Greg were heading back to their precinct. It was a cold and cloudy night. Snow was coming, and the air was damp and frigid, but a little cold wasn't going to frighten the two officers. Rocco and Greg were best friends. They were former Marines who had served together in Vietnam. After that chapter of their lives had ended, the men had requested to be partners, patrolling the streets of what was then regarded as one of New York's most dangerous neighborhoods. They were young men. Rocco Laurie was 23, while Greg Foster was 22. Both of them were married, with wives who feared for their safety. Both of them were dedicated officers. Greg had always wanted to be a cop, while Rocco decided on this career path after realizing college wasn't for him. It was around 10:30 p.m. Rocco and Greg were walking south along Avenue B. That's when they noticed something they deemed worth checking. They saw a car parked in front of a hydrant. They decided to enter a luncheonette across the street. Maybe the owner of the place knew the car. When asked, the man went outside to see the vehicle but said he hadn't seen it before. This prompted Rocco and Greg to leave the small restaurant and resume their walk to the precinct. The two of them needed to learn what was coming for them. Up until then, the night had been relatively quiet. The two officers began walking back north, giving little notice to the three men that passed them, parting to allow Rocco and Greg to walk between them. What happened next is regarded by history as New York's most brutal cop killing. Just a few seconds after 23-year-old Officer Rocco Laurie and 22-year-old Officer Gregory Foster passed, the three men turned and drew pistols. One of them had a .38 automatic, while the other two each had 9mm automatics. Rocco and Greg continued walking, unaware of the imminent danger. They had taken only a few steps when the first bullet struck them from behind. Greg Foster was hit 8 times, collapsing to the pavement, unmoving. Rocco Laurie was shot 6 times. 5 bullets tore through his arms and legs, and the final bullet pierced his neck. Overwhelmed by the shock, Rocco clutched at his throat, then fell to his knees and collapsed to his side. It was a terrifying picture. 2 men pierced by bullets, their blood spreading across the pavement, their killers calmly marching toward them. The killers weren't done. One of them encouraged the others to continue shooting. Once again, they opened fire, their silhouettes looming over the fallen officers. The men fired 3 bullets into Gregory Foster's eyes and 2 more into Rocco Laurie's groin. They only left, running to their vehicle, a Chrysler, after stealing the officers' guns and doing a blood-chilling victory dance. The first officers to respond arrived quickly on the scene, their police sirens echoing through the neighborhood. Rocco Laurie was still alive despite being gravely injured. Streets were closed, civilians were kept at bay, and Rocco was transported to the hospital, but nothing could be done. He died shortly after. As for Gregory Foster, he was already dead by the time help arrived. His blood and brain matter formed a puddle around his body. In 1972, the United States was a tumultuous landscape. Numerous militant groups sought to trigger systemic change, operating through secret underground cells, with the belief that violence was the only path to a better future. These groups fought for civil rights and an end to the Vietnam War, driven by a desire for a violent revolution to reshape society. Fingerprints found in the getaway car suggested the assassins were Ronald Carter, Twyman Myers, and at least one other man. All 3 of them were known members of the Black Liberation Army, an organization police believed responsible for another series of police attacks in New York 8 months before. Ronald Carter, one of the suspects, was shot and killed in a gun battle with police in St. Louis, Missouri, on February 14, 1972. Police found Rocco Laurie's pistol at the scene. Twyman Myers, another suspect, died in the Bronx after a shootout with police. The last suspect, a man called Henry Shaw Brown, was arrested, extradited to New York, and charged with 2 counts of murder, but was acquitted in 1973. Subsequently, he was returned to Missouri and sentenced to 25 years in prison for his involvement in the St. Louis incident. In March 2022, Eastland County, Texas was ravaged by catastrophic wildfires that tore through the region, leaving a trail of destruction. These relentless blazes consumed dozens of structures, including cherished homes, vital businesses, and community buildings, displacing families and disrupting lives. Entire communities were forced to evacuate, fleeing the encroaching infernos that transformed their landscapes into scenes of devastation. The fires left a lasting impact on the region, underscoring the resilience and strength of those affected. Amid this crisis, Deputy Sergeant Barbara Fenley of the Eastland County Sheriff's Office was one of many law enforcement officers who bravely stepped up to assist with traffic control and evacuations, ensuring that residents could leave the danger zone safely and that emergency vehicles could access the affected areas. As multiple fire agencies battled the fire, Barbara set out to check on an older adult stuck in one of the affected areas. However, she never returned home to her family or called them to inform them of her whereabouts. Her family began to worry when she did not answer their phone calls and failed to show up. When they contacted dispatch, they were informed that her current location was unknown, although dispatch confirmed her last known destination. After the fire had been calmed down enough for a rescue search to be initiated, it was discovered that Barbara had been going door to door in the area, which was in the path of the wildfires. She had been attempting to notify other citizens to leave the area due to the encroaching flames and thick smoke. However, as she drove along a farm-to-market road near FM 2526, the visibility became dangerously low due to the thick smoke. At some point, she could no longer see the road ahead clearly. While navigating through the poor visibility, Barbara inadvertently drove off the road and into the wildfire, engulfing her car in flames. Her burnt body was later found in the vehicle by the rescue team and then taken to the morgue. Her family was also informed of the devastating loss. In honor of Barbara, the state governor ordered flags to be lowered to half-staff. He also appreciated her for her service, saying she gave her life in the service of others and loved her community. Meanwhile, tributes poured in from her loved ones and colleagues, with many remarking that she was passionate about her job and deeply loved helping people. Barbara was 51 years old at the time of her death. She began her law enforcement career in 2003 as a patrol officer for the city of Gorman, where she grew up. In January 2007, she was appointed Gorman's chief of police, a position she held until 2013. Afterward, she became a deputy for the Eastland County Sheriff's Office, working diligently as an officer in the courthouse until the tragic incident. During her memorial service at Myrtle Wilkes Community Center in Cisco, an estimated 1,500 to 2,000 people came to pay their last respects. Law enforcement officers around the state made up a significant portion of the crowd, reflecting how highly her colleagues regarded her. Since then, discussions have been raised about designating a section of FM 2526 in Eastland County as the Sergeant Barbara Fenley Memorial Highway to commemorate her sacrifice. Barbara was survived by her husband, 3 children, and 2 grandchildren. 11th, 2001, when Officer Moira Smith's life took a turn that would make her a hero forever. Moira was a dedicated NYPD officer known for her bravery and commitment. That day, she showed the world the true meaning of courage. Moira Ann Reddy Smith started her career in 1988 with the New York City Transit Police Department before joining the NYPD and being assigned to Manhattan's 13th Precinct in 1997. She was well known for her fearless attitude and was awarded the Distinguished Duty Medal for saving lives in a subway crash 10 years before 9/11. Moira lived in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn with her husband Jim Smith, a police officer, and their 2-year-old daughter Patricia. That day, Moira was on duty when she saw the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Without hesitation, she rushed to the scene. She was one of the first officers to respond to the attack. Her immediate response and action showed her bravery and dedication to her duty. Moira entered the South Tower, guiding and calming those trapped inside. She helped many people evacuate safely, directing them out of the building. An iconic photograph captured her escorting a bloodied man, Ed Nichols, to safety. Martin Glynn, another survivor, recalled how Moira was firm yet reassuring. She gave clear and decisive instructions to prevent people from panicking. Her strong voice and presence helped maintain order during the evacuation. Despite the danger, Moira kept re-entering the South Tower to help more people escape. She was tireless in her efforts and showed immense courage. Tragically, the South Tower collapsed at 9:59 a.m. while Moira was still inside. She was actively working to save others until the very end. Moira's remains were found in March 2002. After her passing, her sacrifice and bravery were honored. She was awarded the NYPD's Medal of Honor for her heroic actions, the department's highest honor. Moira was also recognized as one of Glamour and Miss Magazine's Women of the Year for 2001. The NYPD's Police Women's Endowment Association also named her Woman of the Year. Moira's death left a significant impact on her family. Jim Smith, her husband, and Patricia, their daughter, who was just 2 years old, were deeply affected. She was pictured accepting her mother's Medal of Honor at Carnegie Hall on December 4, 2001, wearing a red velvet dress. Years later, Patricia, now an athletic trainer at Tulane University, continues to honor her mother's legacy. In 2016, she spent Mother's Day at Guantanamo Bay, confronting Yemeni Walid bin Attash, one of the terrorists allegedly involved in the attacks. Bin Attash had been locked in the controversial prison for over a decade and had begun pre-trial hearings for his role in the attack that killed nearly 3,000 people, including Moira. Patricia's father, Jim Smith, expressed his pride in his daughter. He was glad she could look bin Attash in the eye and see for herself the person responsible for her mother's murder. Jim believes Patricia will attend almost all of bin Attash's future court hearings, carrying on the search for justice. In the years following the attacks, Jim Smith has been vocal about his views on politicians who call to defund the police. He believes they have no right to hug heroes on September 11th, as they forget the sacrifices made by officers like Moira. Jim spent the 20th anniversary of the attacks with Patricia, reflecting on Moira's bravery and the current state of police treatment in the country. A statue of Moira holding her flashlight while directing traffic during the evacuation has been proposed to honor her heroism. Such a tribute would resonate with many, especially women and healthcare workers, for its understated yet powerful representation of courage in the face of danger. New Year's Day in Narooma, a coastal town on the far south coast of New South Wales, Australia. Peter Stone, a 45-year-old New South Wales police officer, was spending the holiday with his family. Peter was known for his bravery and dedication to his work. He had been part of the police force since 2000 and was most recently attached to the Blue Mountains Police Command, where he specialized in rescue operations. On this particular day, he was off duty, enjoying some much-needed time with his family. Peter and his 14-year-old son decided to visit Bogala Beach, a secluded spot known for its beauty and unpredictable waters. Lifeguards did not patrol the beach, which would soon become tragically significant. As they enjoyed the day, a strong rip current formed, pulling Peter's son out into the dangerous waters. Seeing his son in danger, Peter immediately sprang into action. Despite being on leave, his instinct to protect and rescue took over. Peter dove into the rough waters without hesitation. The waves were high and the current was strong, but he managed to reach his son. He fought the powerful rip, pushing his son toward safety. Peter's son, thanks to his father's heroic efforts, was able to escape the dangerous current and make it back to shore. But Peter was not so fortunate. As he continued to struggle against the rip, Peter was pulled further out to sea. Nearby beachgoers saw what was happening and called for help. Emergency services were alerted around 1:30 p.m. A helicopter from Maruya was dispatched to the scene. From the air, rescuers spotted Peter in the water and directed lifesavers to his location. They rushed to him in an inflatable rescue boat and pulled him from the water, but Peter was unconscious. On the beach, paramedics performed CPR in a desperate attempt to revive him. The efforts of the lifesavers and paramedics were heroic, but ultimately they could not save Peter. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The news of Peter Stone's death sent shockwaves through the community and the New South Wales Police Force. Commissioner Karen Webb expressed her deep condolences, noting that Peter was well liked by all who knew him and that his selfless actions reflected his character. Superintendent Don Faulds, the Blue Mountains Police Commander, described Peter as an exceptional man and a brilliant operator dedicated to helping the community. His colleagues remembered him not just as a co-worker, but as a mate and a hero. Peter's death shows the dangers of the ocean and the importance of swimming at patrolled beaches. Surf Life-Saving NSW Chief Stephen Pierce emphasized that Peter's actions had saved his son's life, even though it cost him his own. This incident was part of a particularly busy summer for lifesavers, with more than 1,000 rescues. The organization urged beachgoers to swim between the flags and heed safety warnings. In the aftermath, NSW police appealed to raise money for Peter's family. They hoped to offer some support during this incredibly difficult time. The outpouring of grief and support from the community was overwhelming, but it could not erase the pain of losing a husband, father, and friend. Hours of June 22, 2013 in Wayne County, Pennsylvania. Daniel J.J. Lomax, a 55-year-old off-duty police officer and volunteer firefighter, was on his way home after finishing his shift. Known for his dedication and willingness to help others, J.J. had served the community for 27 years in law enforcement and as a volunteer firefighter in various departments. On this night, as he drove along Sawmill Road in Salem Township, he encountered a single vehicle accident. The scene was chaotic. A car had crashed into a utility pole and the driver, 20-year-old Angel Cortez, was trapped inside the burning vehicle. Without hesitation, JJ stopped his car and rushed to help. He had done this countless times before, always putting others' safety before his own. But this time was different. As he moved to help, he unknowingly came into contact with a live power line brought down in the crash. The impact was immediate and fatal. JJ was electrocuted and died at the scene. It was around 3:10 a.m. when the call came in, and by the time other responders arrived, it was too late. JJ Lomax was gone. JJ's death sent shockwaves through the communities he served. He had been a part-time police officer for Mayfield, Forest City, and Great Bend departments, and volunteered with fire departments in Factoryville, Scott Township, Meredith, and several others. His colleagues and friends described him as dependable, selfless, and always willing to lend a hand. Matthew Pritchett, the first assistant chief for the Scott Township Hose Company, described him as someone who always put others first and looked out for them. Similarly, Forest City Chief Paul Lucas noted that he would go out of his way to help others, always being there when needed, regardless of his commitments. JJ's dedication to helping others was evident throughout his life. Born in Philadelphia on November 3, 1957, he moved to Factoryville as a teenager to join a foster family. He became an integral part of the Brower family, showing the same generosity to them and others as they did to him. His foster brother Steve Brower described him as a provider who gives to everyone. JJ's career in law enforcement spanned many years in various locations. He left Northeast Pennsylvania about a decade ago to work as a police officer in Maryland, but returned to the area 2 years before his death. In May 2012, he began working in Great Bend and quickly became an active member of the police force and the community. Chief John Record of Great Bend described him as a generous individual who was always willing to help others, noting that he died doing what he loved, helping people. The news of JJ's death spread quickly. A photo of him and the announcement of his passing, posted on the police department's Facebook page, received hundreds of comments and shares. Mayfield Chief Joseph Parachinsky described him as the most dedicated officer he had ever seen, emphasizing that his department would deeply miss him. JJ's funeral was held at Evergreen Woodlawn Cemetery, where friends, family, and colleagues gathered to pay their respects. The Reverend Paul Fields II, the Factoryville Volunteer Fire Company chaplain, led the graveside services. JJ was laid to rest, surrounded by those who admired and loved him. JJ Lomax's story is one of dedication and sacrifice. He was a man who lived to help others, and in the end he died doing what he loved. His legacy lives on in the communities he served and the lives he touched. JJ is survived by his wife, 2 sons, and several siblings. His death will be a reminder of the risk that first responders face every day. On January 9, 2023, Jose Luis Sonco Quispe, a 29-year-old police officer, was patrolling the streets of Juliaca, Peru. The night was dark and tense. The region of Puno had been a hotbed of unrest following the ouster of President Pedro Castillo, and the atmosphere was charged with anger and frustration. Sonco, alongside his partner, Ronald Villasante Toc, was on duty, trying to maintain order in a city on the brink of chaos. Juliaca, a city near the Bolivian border and Lake Titicaca, had seen escalating violence over the past month. Demonstrations had turned deadly as supporters of the former president clashed with police forces. The death toll from these confrontations had risen steadily, reaching 47 by the day of the tragic incident. The unrest had begun in early December, following the arrest and impeachment of Pedro Castillo. Castillo had attempted to dissolve Congress in a last-ditch effort to avoid impeachment, a move that was widely condemned and ultimately unsuccessful. His arrest triggered widespread protests, particularly in rural areas where he had strong support. Castillo's successor, Dina Boluarte, had tried to calm the situation by pushing for early elections and supporting investigations into police actions. However, these measures did little to pacify the enraged populace. On the night of January 9th, Sonco and Villasante were patrolling an area known for its intense protests. The city was in turmoil, with demonstrators demanding immediate elections and expressing their loyalty to Castillo. The protests had taken a particularly violent turn, with clashes between civilians and police resulting in numerous fatalities. As the two officers drove through the streets, they were suddenly ambushed by a large mob of around 350 protesters. The attack was swift and brutal. The mob surrounded their patrol car, shouting and throwing objects. Within moments, the situation spiraled out of control. The protesters dragged the officers from the vehicle and began to beat them mercilessly. Ronald Villasante Toque, Sonko's partner, later described the scene as a savage attack. He was beaten severely, sustaining multiple head injuries. In the chaos, he lost sight of Sonko and was unaware of his partner's fate. Villasante was eventually taken to a hospital in Lima, where he recounted the horrific events to authorities. Meanwhile, the mob's fury turned even more deadly. After assaulting the officers, the protesters set fire to the patrol car. José Luis Sonko Quispe, unable to escape, was burned alive in the vehicle. His charred remains were found by the police, who arrived at the scene later. Prime Minister Alberto Otarola confirmed Sonko's death during a session of Congress. He expressed his condolences and condemned the violent actions of the protesters. Otarola also announced a 3-day curfew in Puno, from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., and declared a day of mourning for the fallen officer. The death of Officer Sonko was a grim addition to the mounting toll of violence in Peru. Since the protests began in early December, 39 civilians had been killed in clashes with police, 7 had died in related traffic accidents, and now a police officer had lost his life in a particularly horrific manner. The previous day, January 8th, had seen the killing of 17 people in Juliaca, further escalating the violence and unrest in the region. As the news of Sonko's death spread, it became a symbol of the escalating violence and the deepening crisis in Peru. His tragic end highlighted the dangers faced by law enforcement officers in such volatile situations, as well as the intense anger and desperation driving the protests. In the days following the attack, the government tried to restore order in Juliaca and other affected areas. The curfew imposed in Puno was part of these efforts, aimed at preventing further violence and giving the authorities a chance to regroup. However, the deep-rooted issues fueling the unrest remained unresolved, and the country continued to teeter on the edge of widespread chaos. The brutal killing of José Luis Sonko Quispe left many questions unanswered. How had the situation escalated to such a deadly point? What could have been done to prevent this tragedy? In the end, the story of José Luis Sonko Quispe is a tragic example of the dangers faced by those on the front lines of civil unrest. It is a sobering reminder of the need for thoughtful, compassionate solutions to deep-seated social and political problems. On August 2, 2023, just before 6 a.m., 22-year-old Officer Matthew Hare of the Easley Police Department received a call about a person in distress. The call was urgent. Someone was experiencing a mental health crisis on the railroad tracks near the 2000 block of East Main Street in Easley, South Carolina. This was not just a simple cry for help. The person was trying to take their own life and had placed themselves in grave danger. Hare, a rookie officer who had only been sworn in 5 months earlier, did not hesitate. He knew that time was of the essence. Officer Hare and his partner rushed to the scene, knowing that every second could mean the difference between life and death. They began their search for the individual in distress as soon as they arrived. For nearly an hour, the officers combed the area, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The railroad tracks, which normally lay quiet at this hour, felt foreboding under the weight of the urgent mission. Eventually, they found the person, a man clearly in a mental health crisis. He was disoriented and distraught, his intentions clear yet confused. As Officer Hare approached, he spoke calmly and reassuringly. His goal was to save this person's life. The situation was delicate, and any wrong move could escalate the crisis. Hare knew he had to act fast, but also be gentle. With his partner assisting, Hare managed to convince the man to move away from the immediate danger of the tracks. But fate had other plans. Just as they were guiding the man to safety, the distant sound of an oncoming train became audible. The Amtrak Crescent, a passenger train running from New York to New Orleans, was approaching. The urgency intensified. The train's powerful headlight pierced through the early morning mist, a sign of imminent danger. Officer Hare acted on instinct. He focused solely on getting the man off the tracks. As the train neared, its sound grew deafening. In those final moments, Hare managed to push the man out of harm's way. The man was saved, but Hare wasn't as fortunate. The train struck Officer Hare, killing him instantly. He died a hero, having given his life to save another. The aftermath was a scene of both sorrow and respect. Lieutenant Ashley Anderson of the Easley Police Department faced the media later that day, struggling to hold back tears. "It is a tragic day," she said. "Officer Hare died saving the life of someone he did not know. He was a hero." She asked the community to keep Hare's family in their prayers. The tragic news spread quickly through the community. Easley was in mourning. A procession was held later that afternoon to honor Officer Hare's sacrifice. Multiple law enforcement agencies joined in paying their respects. A memorial fund was established for his family, and Hare's patrol car was placed in front of the Easley Police Department, adorned with flowers, pictures, and notes from grieving citizens. The Amtrak Crescent train was delayed for about 7 hours, as the State Law Enforcement Division and the Pickens County Coroner's Office conducted their investigations. No one aboard the train was injured, but the impact on the community was profound. The individual whom Officer Hare saved was taken into custody. Details about whether charges were filed against the man were not disclosed, and his identity remains protected due to the sensitive nature of his mental health crisis. Hare's partner, who had been with him during the rescue, was unharmed but deeply affected by the loss of his colleague and friend. Lieutenant Colonel Arnaud Beltrame, at 45, had dedicated over 2 decades of his life to the French military. His unwavering commitment and exceptional service saw him rise through the ranks, earning the prestigious Cross of Military Valor, among other honors. His career was marked by bravery and a profound sense of duty, making him a celebrated figure in the military. In August 2017, he assumed the role of Deputy Commander at the Carcassonne Departmental Gendarmerie Unit. Situated in a tranquil medieval town rarely troubled by major incidents, it appeared Arnaud sought to peacefully wind down his career after years of being in the thick of the action. However, less than a year after he joined the unit, life took a different turn for him. On March 23, 2018, Arnaud encountered the terrorist Redouane Lakhdim, who was linked to the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. That morning, Lakhdim had hijacked a car from an unsuspecting driver who was going about his daily activities. During the process, he injured the driver, killed the passenger in the car, and then dumped the body in the bush. But that wasn't all. Lakhdim also shot at a group of policemen who were out jogging, injuring one of them, as he thought they were onto him. After hijacking the car, Lakhdim drove a short distance to the small town of Trebes to carry out his sinister plan. Armed with a handgun, a hunting knife, and 3 homemade bombs, he stormed into the Super U supermarket, shouting, "I am a soldier of Daesh," a moniker for the Islamic State. Within moments, he killed 2 more people, including a customer and a store worker, before taking the remaining people in the supermarket as hostages. Arnaud and a couple of other police officers were the first to arrive at the scene after concerned individuals reported the ongoing incident. They made contact with Lakhdim, who demanded that authorities release Salah Abdeslam, the only living suspect and alleged mastermind of the 2015 terror attacks in Paris that left 130 dead. During the standoff, Arnaud and his colleagues were able to negotiate the release of the hostages, except one. Lakhdim had held back the person left behind as a human shield while he waited for his primary demand to be met. Disturbed by the woman's fear for her life, Arnaud decided to take action. He had trained for such moments in the past and believed it was best to swap himself with the woman. He then volunteered to be exchanged for her, not thinking about the fact that he was risking his own life. As the exchange occurred, Arnaud left his mobile phone on a table inside the supermarket, keeping the line open for police outside to monitor the situation. The standoff remained tense for several hours, but after 3 hours passed and Lakhdim realized his demand might not be met, he stabbed and shot Arnaud. This prompted the police tactical unit to wait outside to storm the supermarket, resulting in Lakhdim being shot and killed. Despite sustaining severe injuries, Arnaud was still alive when rushed to Carcassonne Hospital nearby. However, in the early hours of the following day, he succumbed to his injuries. Autopsy reports later revealed that Arnaud had suffered 4 gunshot wounds from Lakhdim, but it was the stab wounds to the throat that proved fatal. Following the incident, claimed responsibility in a statement via its Amaq news agency, stating in Arabic that a soldier of the Islamic State carried out the attack in response to calls to target the coalition countries. Investigations later revealed that Lakhdim had been on an extremist watch list due to his radicalization and connections with the Salafist movement, a hardline branch of Sunni Islam. However, he was not monitored closely at earlier points as he had not indicated imminent action. Arnaud's act of bravery earned him tributes from around the world. French President Emmanuel Macron described him as demonstrating exceptional courage and sacrifice, and that he died a hero by giving his life. The late colonel was also posthumously awarded the Legion of Honor, and many cities announced plans to name streets, squares, or buildings in his honor. For over a decade since joining the Waterloo Regional Police Service in 1989, Constable David Rodney Nicholson has exemplified dedication and service to the community. Throughout his career, he became a vital member of the Emergency Response Unit. He excelled as a police diver with the Underwater Search and Recovery Unit, showcasing his commitment to public safety and specialized operations. He was expected to locate and retrieve bodies, evidence, vehicles, and other objects, such as weapons, from underwater environments and conduct underwater rescues in cases of drowning or accidents. On the evening of August 12, 1998, the Underwater Search and Recovery Unit received a call to rescue 10-year-old Mark Gage, who had disappeared under the water at the Park Hill Dam. Mark had been swimming at the dam with his friend when he suddenly vanished. After over 30 minutes passed without any sign of Mark resurfacing, his friends, concerned that he might have drowned or that his life was in grave danger, quickly reported the incident to authorities. Dave and fellow constables Rob Sove and Curtis Rutt were dispatched to the location to help. Upon their arrival, Dave donned his diving gear, including a scuba tank, and then jumped in to begin the search. He started around the last place Mark was seen, then extended his search to other parts of the dam. When he began searching among the jutting wall abutments of the dam, he was sucked inside the sluice due to the dangerous underwater currents and eddies created by the abutments. It was believed that he found Mark here, with the prevailing theory being that the boy had also been pulled into the sluice. Despite his wealth of experience, Dave couldn't attempt to swim out of the sluice, as he discovered that his scuba tank got wedged in a hole when he was sucked in. To save himself and possibly the kid, he sent a distress signal through his lifeline to Rob and Curtis, who were waiting above. Following standard protocol, the duo attempted to haul Dave back up using the lifeline. However, the current proved too powerful. Even when over 50 bystanders and responders tried to help, they could still not overcome the water's fierce grip. Dave's lifeline was cut during the process, ending the possibility of being hauled out by his rope. At the time, there remained hope that Dave could still be rescued. Sove, one of his partners, bravely entered the dam to assess the situation and provide a new lifeline to Dave. Unfortunately, Sove was also drawn into the sluice, but unlike Dave, Sove freed himself and resurfaced while gaining crucial insights into Dave's predicament. He made 2 further attempts to dislodge Dave from where he was stuck, but regrettably, both efforts were unsuccessful. In another desperate bid to save Dave, Rutt, his third partner, plunged into the water with a scuba tank secured to a long pole. However, as Rutt neared Dave, the powerful current ripped the tank from the pole, swallowing it whole. Undeterred, Rutt surfaced, retrieved a guide rope, and with a Herculean effort, managed to secure it near Dave. Yet another devastating twist of fate unfolded. When Rutt and others tried to pull the line up, it became clear that Dave's regulator hose was snagged. This fatal entanglement severed his air supply, leaving him unable to breathe underwater. Within minutes, Dave succumbed to drowning. Dave's tragic death marked the first officer fatality in the 25-year history of the Waterloo Regional Police Service. His body, along with that of Mark, was discovered 3 days later, with Dave cradling the young boy in his arms. Since his passing, Dave's unwavering dedication and selfless heroism have been fondly remembered. On January 5, 1983, 25-year-old Alistair Anthony was walking his dog along the Blackpool seafront while on vacation. Being a tourist, he was unaware of the sea's powerful waves, which often posed risks even to expert swimmers. During the walk, Alistair's dog had headed recklessly for the sea in pursuit of its ball and quickly began to drown. Confident in his swimming abilities, Alistair immediately jumped in to rescue his dog. While wading along the seawall apron, a wave swept him off his feet. He then managed to swim to a nearby concrete slope, but struggled to find a way out of the water. An anonymous individual who witnessed Alistair struggling in the water called the authorities. Shortly after, Angela Bradley, Gordon Connolly, and 2 other officers were dispatched to the scene to attempt a rescue. They arrived with a promenade lifebelt, intending to provide it to Alistair so he could use it to return to shore. However, as Angela and Gordon attempted to reach him, they were tragically swept away by the strong current and crashing waves. 3 people were now lost in the water. Still, emergency officers on the scene believed a rescue operation could still be feasible for some of them. At this point, road traffic officer Colin Morrison arrived at the scene and joined the rescue attempt. However, like Angela and Gordon before him, Colin was swept away by the sea, intensified by a strong westerly gale. The conditions were so severe that the lifeboat from neighboring Fleetwood, which had been summoned, took 3 hours to reach the area. Upon arrival, the waves remained too powerful, allowing them to approach only within 68 meters of where the officers had last been spotted. Amid the dire situation, a 4th officer, PC Pat Abram, bravely jumped into the sea to continue the rescue attempt, but quickly found himself in danger of drowning. Fortunately, his colleagues managed to throw a rope around him and pull him to safety, where he received immediate mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. With previous rescue efforts having proved futile, the chief superintendent, who was kept informed of the unfolding events, reluctantly issued an order prohibiting anyone else from entering the water to prevent further loss of life. When the waves finally subsided, Colin's body was recovered by a winchman lowered from a helicopter. Several days later, Angela's body was found on a sandbank at Presall. Alistair's body was discovered at Knot End 9 days after the incident. Gordon was the last to be seen, with his body recovered just days before the end of the month. All 3 cops were honored with a memorial plaque within Jubilee Gardens, Gin Square, Blackpool. Metro Nashville Police Department officer Eric Mumaw loved the night shift. The 44-year-old was an 18-year veteran of the force, but this didn't prevent him from volunteering to take the night shift whenever he could. February 2, 2017 was no different. Eric was on duty when the Emergency Communications Center received a call at 4:16 a.m. The call came from a family member of a woman named Julie Glisson. According to this person, 40-year-old Julie was in her car, on the boat ramp at the edge of the Cumberland River, threatening to end her own life. Julie had a history of self-harm attempts. This time around, her relative was worried Julie was going to succeed. They needed someone to go and prevent her from taking her own life. Eric Mumaw responded to the call. Officers Nick Diamond and Trent Craig joined him. Together, the 3 men rushed to the scene. In cases like these, every second matters. Eric Mumaw was no stranger to helping people in even dire situations. Throughout his career, he helped everyone from abducted babies to victims of violent attacks, or even people experiencing homelessness. He was the kind of person who always went the extra mile, and his efforts didn't go unnoticed. In 2003, Eric received the department's Exemplary Service Award. He was decorated again in 2011 when he received the department's Life-Saving Award. The police officers quickly arrived at the scene. They saw the car parked at the bottom of the Peeler Park Greenway Trailhead boat ramp at the edge of the Cumberland River, a significant waterway. Its waters are deep. Given the time of year, they were also bound to be icy and unforgiving. The 3 men split up. Officer Nick Diamond approached the car from the passenger side, while officers Eric Mumaw and Trent Craig came from the driver's side. 40-year-old Julie Glisson was sitting behind the wheel. They started talking to the woman, trying to get her to reconsider and leave the car. The situation was tense because the officer knew Julie could put the car into gear any time. They talked for about 10 minutes. Officer Trent Craig slowly reached in, trying to prevent Julie from putting the car into gear. Meanwhile, Eric Mumaw attempted to open the door because it seemed that Julie would get out of the car after all. That's when the car started moving, heading toward the icy waters of the Cumberland River. It all happened in a flash. As Eric Mumaw and Nick Diamond tried to grab the car, both men lost their balance. The vehicle started submerging, dragging the 2 men with it. The car and the ensuing powerful current pulled them further into the river. The water was indeed icy. It was mayhem. After a while, though, Nick Diamond somewhat regained control. He saw Eric struggling to stay above the water and drifting further into the river. Nick reached for Eric, but his grip wasn't firm enough. He lost it, and Eric drifted away. Meanwhile, Officer Trent Craig saw Eric getting carried away by the river. Trent ran along the riverbank. Then he spotted the top of Eric's head. Trent wasted no second, plunged into the cold water which came up to his neck. He tried to swim and reach Eric, but the cold and the extreme conditions overcame his body. Trent knew he had to escape the river to survive, so he did. Nick Diamond and Trent Craig called for help. Julie Glisson had managed to get out of the water sometime before. Eric Mumaw's body was recovered by a rescue dive team some 5 hours after he was swept away at 9 a.m. that morning. He was found less than 100 yards away from the boat ramp. Julie Glisson was charged with vehicular homicide by intoxication and pleaded guilty. She was sentenced to serve 12 years and barred from driving for 10 years. Eric Mumaw was not married and had no children. Family, friends, and colleagues mourned him, and hundreds of officers traveled from multiple states to attend his memorial. On August 24, 2023, Sergeant Graham Saville was at work. Graham, who began his policing career with the Metropolitan Police in 2013, joined Nottinghamshire Police in 2017. He was based at Newark Police Station and recently became a response sergeant. Graham, who was 46 years old and a father of 2, loved his job. His wanting to make a difference was what led him to become a police officer in the first place. To those who knew him, family and colleagues alike, Graham was the epitome of what a police officer should be. He was empathetic, kind, funny, and compassionate. His peers greatly respected him because he loved helping and developing younger officers. He was the one who always ensured the team was coping with some of the more challenging incidents. That Thursday, just before 7 p.m., the Nottinghamshire Police received a call from a residential area in Balderton, one of the largest villages in Nottinghamshire, England. The call was made over concerns for a man's safety. Sergeant Graham Saville responded to the call. When he arrived at the scene, Graham noticed a man in distress. The man, who appeared younger than Graham, was on the railway line near Newark Northgate Station. He needed help, and being on the railway line made the situation even more stressful. Any approaching train was bound to become a problem, but Graham Saville was a dutiful police officer. He was also selfless and brave, ready to face any danger to save another person. Graham approached the man and tried to help him, but his attempt was cut short when he was struck by a train. People watched the highly traumatic incident in horror. Graham Saville was taken to the hospital, having suffered severe injuries. The other man, who was 29 years old, was also taken to the hospital with electricity-induced injuries, which were deemed non-life-threatening. Between the two of them, Graham was by far in a graver condition. 5 days after the incident, he succumbed to his injuries and died at Queen's Medical Center, surrounded by his family and loved ones. Graham's death was described as a selfless sacrifice. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called his ultimate sacrifice a testament to his bravery. In April 2024, Deputy Fred Fislar of the Hendricks County Police received a call about a single vehicle crash within his vicinity. The incident involved a 2009 silver Honda colliding with a utility pole, shattering it on impact and leaving electrical wires hanging close to the ground. Knowing that the downed wires posed a significant danger to any passers-by and the yet-to-be-identified occupant of the vehicle, Fred rushed to the scene to assess the situation and coordinate the emergency response required. Upon his arrival, Deputy Fred Fislar noticed that the driver had suffered severe burns and immediately initiated efforts to rescue him. However, he unfortunately came into contact with the hanging electrical lines that were still flowing with current during the process. Instantly, he was severely shocked by the current and lost consciousness. Minutes later, a passerby saw the incident and noticed Fred lying unresponsive on the road. The individual quickly used Fred's radio to contact the Hendricks County Communications Center to inform them about the situation. When the emergency medical service officers arrived, they found Fred in a critical condition. They initiated life-saving measures on the scene and continued to provide emergency care as he was transported to the nearest hospital. Despite their best efforts, Fred was ultimately pronounced dead hours later, succumbing to the severe injuries sustained from the electrical shock. Ironically, the driver of the 2009 silver Honda that had crashed into the utility pole, Juan Gomez, survived the incident. Although he had sustained severe burn injuries, they were not life-threatening, and he was subsequently released from the hospital pending the completion of an investigation into the incident. However, in a shocking turn of events, Juan was arrested before the conclusion of the inquiry for a separate operating while intoxicated OWI incident that had occurred before the crash. He faced multiple charges in that case: operating a vehicle while intoxicated, endangering a person, minor consuming alcohol, knowingly or intentionally operating a motor vehicle without ever receiving a license, and operating a car with an alcohol concentration equivalent to 0.15 or more. Before Fred's death, he had served in the Hendricks County Police Department for only 3 years after leaving the United States Marine Corps. A memorial service was held in his honor at Cloverdale High School, where he was an alumnus. Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter attended the service and described Fred as the epitome of a United States Marine, a proud father, husband, and son, and a peer and mentor to many people. A close friend also fondly remembered Fred, saying, "He was always smiling. He was the life of the party and never had a bad word to say about anyone." Fred is survived by his wife and 2 young children, who now face an unimaginable loss. In solidarity, the Hendricks County Sheriff's Office established an official fund for donations to support his grieving family. Additionally, a Red Cross blood drive was organized in his honor, reflecting his spirit of giving. Efforts are also underway to commemorate Fred's dedicated service, with plans to rename the section of road where the tragic incident occurred after him, ensuring his legacy endures in the community he served so faithfully.